By the time the rocket hit him, he'd already made peace with dying. He was in Afghanistan, in an open-top Humvee, when an RPG came screaming out of a tree line. It vanished into his field of view, and then everything just stopped, or so he thought. His gunner dove for cover. The driver swore and wrenched the wheel. The air exploded with dust and splinters. And the man who should have been a red mist on the floor of the vehicle looked down and saw a rocket-propelled grenade sticking out of his body like a steel javelin, and it hadn't exploded. Stories like this sound like urban legends, the kind of thing soldiers tell around a fire. Until you see the photos, the X-rays, and the official after-action reports. This one is very real. It happened in 2006 in eastern Afghanistan. To a young American cavalry scout named Channing Moss, he was manning a heavy machine gun on his Humvee when Taliban fighters opened up from the high ground. They fired an RPG straight at his vehicle. Now, RPGs are designed to kill armored targets, not people. On impact, the shape-charged warhead is supposed to detonate, sending a jet of superheated metal forward, hot enough to burn through inches of solid steel. But this one didn't. The rocket hit Moss square in the hip, punched clean through his pelvis, tore a horrifying tunnel across his abdomen and stopped. Its unexploded warhead was buried deep inside him, and its tail fins were still sticking out of his back. His friends looked over and saw the impossible, an RPG literally protruding from their buddy, like something from a horrible cartoon. And the fuse and the explosives inside were still live. In that instant, they knew two things with absolute certainty. First, if that warhead decided to function, everyone within a few meters was dead. And second, if they left him there, he was dead anyway. So they did something that, in its own way, was just as insane as the rocket not exploding. They chose to risk all of them to save one of them. Under fire, they dragged Moss out of the vehicle, stabilized him as best they could, and frantically radioed for a medevac helicopter. When the Black Hawk arrived, the crew chief took one look at the live rocket embedded in the casualty, and said what any sane person was thinking. Absolutely not. It was against every rule in the book. If that warhead cooked off in midair, it would turn the helicopter into shrapnel and scatter everyone on board across the mountainside. The pilot had to make a call most of us will never have to face. He could obey regulations and refuse the load, leaving Moss to die. Or he could break every safety rule and trust that fate would blink twice in one day. He chose the second option. Moss was flown, rocket and all, to a field hospital that had never, ever dealt with anything like this before. The situation was surreal. Explosive ordnance disposal techs, the bomb squad came in and laid sandbags around the operating table. The surgeons put on flak vests over their scrubs. One wrong move, one static spark, and the entire operating room would become a crater. And then, just like the first time the RPG hit, the next miracle was horribly simple. The warhead stayed dormant. The surgeons carefully, painstakingly cut it out of his body. They then handed it off, like a live snake, to the waiting bomb techs, who took it away to be safely detonated. Channing Moss lived. He didn't just survive. He went home, he recovered, and eventually, he met the medics and the pilots who had broken all the rules for him. And when they all got together years later to tell the story for a news crew, they kept circling back to the same two unbelievable facts. He shouldn't be here, and yet he is. On one level, this is just a statistical freak. Artillerymen and infantry soldiers know that a small percentage of all munitions are duds. It can be a bad fuse, a fault in manufacturing, or a weird angle of impact. Every battlefield has its haunted stories. A grenade that didn't go off in a foxhole, a landmine that clicked but never detonated, a bullet that passed clean through a helmet without touching skin. Statistically, it's inevitable that someone, somewhere, is going to be standing in the exact path of a weapon that fails to function. But cold, hard numbers don't capture what it feels like from inside the blast radius that never happens. For Moss, for his family, and for all the people who have their own version of an RPG that hit, but didn't explode, the experience splits time in two. There is the life before you should have died, and then there's the life after you somehow didn't. It changes you forever. What makes this particular story so gripping is the way that blind, dumb luck and deliberate, conscious courage are tangled together so tightly. The fuse that failed to ignite? That's pure luck. A 1 in a million chance. But the medic who knelt beside a man with a live warhead sticking out of his gut and started in 4 anyway, that as a choice. The pilot who weighed the safety of his crew against the bleeding soldier on the ground and said, "Load him? That's a choice." The surgeons who stood over that operating table, listening for the click that would mean they and their patient were about to vanish. That act choice, repeated with every single movement of the scalpel. Without the first kind of miracle, the lucky one, none of the others would have mattered. He would have been gone before anyone could even react. But without the second kind of miracle, the courageous one, that dud rocket would just be a tragic curiosity in an X-ray. Not a man walking his daughter to school years later. Ask combat veterans about it. And many will tell you they've seen variations on this theme. They'll talk about the mortar shell that landed right in the middle of a group of soldiers and simply didn't go off. They'll mention the IED that was wired wrong. Or the incoming rocket that punched through a wall and skidded across the floor before lying there like an oversized cigar. Some will call it God. Some will call it fate, or probability, or just plain dumb luck. But almost all of them will have the same quiet, distant look in their eyes when they finish the story. It's a look that says, I know exactly how thin the margin really was. I know what it feels like to be on the wrong side of that line, and then suddenly find yourself on the right one. That's what sits behind a headline like, an RPG hit him, and didn't explode. It isn't just a freak incident or a viral photograph. It is a profound reminder that modern war is a place where industrial killing power and human decision-making intersect in the strangest, most unpredictable ways. Machines fail, fuses misfire, and sometimes the very thing that should have ended you becomes the razor-thin opening that lets courage, duty, and sheer stubborn human will rush in to save the day. For Channing Moss, that opening was a faulty fuse. But it was also the bravery of his friends, the audacity of a pilot, and the steady hands of surgeons. It was the difference between an obituary and the rest of his life. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you next time.